guys, welcome back to ITS Tactical. In today's video we're going to be showing you some of the steps on setting up the tarp. If you remember on the last video we went into setting up the trunk line and we got that finalized. So all we have left to do now is just set up our tarp. And what I'm going to do first is kind of spread this out on the ground and kind of show you how I have the tarp set up, and then we'll go into actually attaching it with knots to the trunk line. One thing I do want to note on this Integral Designs tarp is that even with the trunk line, you're still looking, actually the tarp itself weighs about 7 to 7.1 ounces with the stuff sack, and with all the 550 that I have in here that's already pre-tied on the tarp, you're still looking at about 14.2 ounces or something like that. I think I weighed it yesterday and that's what I was getting. So that's even including the trunk line. So it's still a very lightweight option. As you can see, very small. The trunk line isn't stuffed in here obviously, but there's plenty of room in the top of the stuff sack to stuff that in there as well, the 30-foot trunk line. So with that, let's open it up on the ground and I'll kind of show you how I have it rigged up. Okay guys, welcome back. Let's take a look at this tarp that I have laid out here. As you can see, it's a 5x8 tarp, which is 8 feet long by 5 feet wide. So I want to especially note, right in the beginning here, the most important aspect of this tarp is this outside attachment point, this outside loop. As you can see, I've just got some 550 cord girth hitched on here, and these are my Prusik Loops. And I've got one there, one here. So essentially they're on each of the uppermost attachment points here on the tarp. And so that's how the tarp is actually going to get attached to the trunk line here through the means of Prusik Loops. And we'll show that here in a second. I'll break and we'll get those set up. Okay, hopefully you guys all remember how to tie a Prusik Loop, but if not, we're going to go over the double fisherman's knot just in case to teach you how to tie a Prusik Loop. So all you're going to do is take your two working ends of the rope. You're just going to, actually, you can honestly just tie a simple overhand knot, but I like to tie a double overhand knot. So I like to loop twice and then come back through. Just provides a little bit more rigidity to your eventual Prusik loop. So there's one side, and you're just going to do the same thing with the other side. Oops, let me do it this way here. Alright, so once you have your two knots tied, all you do is pull the opposite ends here and slide it together, forming your Prusik loop. So to start attaching this to the line, you're going to come over like this, in, and this essentially just creates a girth hitch, but before you actually tie it, you're going to wrap 2 more times. Pull it tight and then straighten up your line. So now if you remember, I had a Prusik loop on each of those points in the tarp. So let's break and I'll show you how the tarp gets attached to this Prusik in just a second. Alright, so you may be wondering why we're using Prusik loops as our attachment points for the tarp. Well, the first reason, if you know anything about Prusiks, is that they do not move on another line. And why that's important is that once you get it attached to the middle of this tarp, as well as the ends, your tarp isn't going to go anywhere. And that's important in wind because you definitely don't want your tarp blowing around and moving positions on you. So the way I secure this to the tarp is to simply run my Prusik loop through and just give it the old double overhand knot, or 2 half hitches. Just like so. That attaches the tarp to the trunk line. The benefit of this tarp, which I really like, is that it has these outside attachment points. Now, why is this important? Well, outside attachment points will allow you to string it to this trunk line without having to worry about the line coming on the inside of the tarp. And if you've ever been in the rain under a tarp, you'll know that the line is one of the first places that rain collects and starts wicking its way into where you're sleeping and dropping raindrops on your head. So that's never a good thing when you're setting up a tarp. So these outside attachment points are really a plus with this tarp. So let's get these other two end attachment points tied up with Prusik Loops, and we'll show you what that looks like in a second. Okay, so now we have our tarp attached to the trunk line using our 3 Prusiks, as you can see here. So let me demonstrate that this thing does not go anywhere once you tug on it. And that's a very important aspect, which I went over just a second ago. Now, the next part of this is to actually rig the guy lines that are going to hold the tarp and anchor it into the floor or the ground. And you're going to need some stakes. I've just found some sticks that are near where I'm at, carved them into a tip, and just kind of created a little point for the 550 that's going to come from the guy lines to anchor into these. You can also use a small shepherd's hook like this, or any kind of titanium tent stake, anything you'd like. It really doesn't matter. But I like to just find things where I'm at, and it reduces the weight of the whole tarp system that I carry. So with that, you're obviously going to need something too to pound in the stakes. Most likely where you're going to be at, hopefully we'll have a rock, but you might want to carry something just in case. So the Guyline system is what we'll go over next. And let me really zoom in so you can see the system. And I've known how to set up a tarp for a long time, and I've been familiar with a trunk line and attaching it with Prusiks and things like that. But I can't take credit for the ingenious Guyline system that my buddy Mike from Bushcraft Northwest has come up with, and I'll really get into that in a second and show you what that looks like exactly. I've always just run guy lines out from every one of these attachment points, just like this, to a separate stake or a separate anchor point into the ground. But he's come up with a real ingenious way to not only distribute the weight between each of the anchor points, but also provide a way for the tarp not to blow around with just 4 attachment points. So we'll show that in just a second. Okay, now let's take a look at the Guyline system. What you have here is obviously your main guy line coming from the corner of the tarp. And if you think about the way to anchor a tarp, if you had all 4 of these corners anchored in, you'd still get kind of a bowing effect that happens whenever wind hits the tarp. So to counter that, Mike from Bushcraft Northwest has come up with this ingenious way to take a secondary and tertiary guide line and run them through an alpine butterfly loop in this primary guy line, and have them have individual adjustment points using a taut line hitch. And this is just an excellent way to rig up this system. Obviously your main guy line is going to have a taut line hitch as well, and we'll show how all that gets set up. We'll show you how to tie a taut line hitch as well as an alpine butterfly and get all this set up. We'll be right back. Okay, I went ahead and guyed out one of the sides just so you could see exactly what the system looks like all tied in, and then we'll go over the knots. So here's your midpoint. As you can see, there's a line running to the right and the left here. And those knots, and that's the tertiary guide line, secondary guide line, and primary guide line. So those all funnel in to this main attachment point here, which is that alpine butterfly knot. And then you can see the taut line hitches for the secondary and tertiary line, the post in the ground, and the primary taut line hitch. So let's get into tying an alpine butterfly knot and a taut line hitch, and we'll show you how to set up this system. You can see how nice and tight this tarp is staying as well, despite the wind that's blowing. Be right back. Alright, we're going to go ahead and stop there since YouTube only allows 10-minute videos, and we'll be back with you for the next installment of rigging up a tarp. Thanks for watching.